Alright, let's talk about Black Panther's gear. For the melee piece, the piece you really want is a piece with rampant assistance. It's absolutely necessary. It gives you 200%, 210% heroic charge rate while you're overcharged, and this means while Percussive Blast is active. I also highly recommend to get a heavy combo finisher, status effect, and you can get heavy combo finisher, or ideally the best top perk would be a Faultless Spark, and it's important to have a gold triple stat with good stats. That's what you want. This is just an RNG piece you can get from chests or vendors. For the range piece, just another RNG piece you can get from chests or vendors. What you really want is Targeted Spark. The bottom perk, Targeted Spark or Targeted Lethal Targeted Damage buff would be your best options, and you want Kinetic Daggers to a status effect, and ideally you want it gold with triple stat. And the cool thing about the Targeted Spark is all three of your heroics can trigger it. These your spears, when your Panther's running over guys, and when your beads hit guys or when they explode, they can trigger the Targeted Sparks. So you combo that with the first piece, you go crazy with the heroics, you can just spam them. For the chest piece, another RNG piece, you're going to want reactive damage buff. The cool thing about reactive damage buff for Black Panther is throwing your spears can trigger it for some reason. So that means there's about a 1 in 7 chance every time you throw your spear, you just get the damage buff, which is awesome. The best bottom perk is Proximity Safeguard, and this can actually be activated by your Spectral Warriors that you summon. So that's a nice little bonus, and you want a gold on triple good stats. You can also cheese this Untouchable Beads perk, which you'll get recovery beads after you perfectly evade, which is pretty cool. And here's the piece you need for the cheese. It's the Battle Guard of the Ancestors. You can get from flashbacks or priority threat sectors or the Rushka Protocol bi-weekly event. It doesn't have to be the exotic version. You just need the top perk to cheese. And only the perfect evade triggers. Defeating enemies with intrinsic attacks won't cheese. For the heroic 4-piece, this is very important. You want the Legacy of the Unconquered. This is the ideal perfect piece, Valor, Resolve, Precision. And the exotic piece gets Bass Kimono Beads, which will debuff enemies with the Mark of Bast if they have the beads on them. The most important perk is the King's Mercy Intrinsic. It's going to be just candy. You're just going to be creating so many intrinsic orbs when you hit these people with your spears. The top perk is decent, but not super important. And here's the stat pool. Ideally, Precision, Valor, Resolve is your best one. And I recommend getting the exotic version. You just get it from villain sectors. For the stat relic, you want a Valor relic. This specific relic was sold from the vendor. You will use heavy combo finishers, so the heavyweight boon is pretty useful. Ideally, they go up to 64, 64, 64, which this one will upgrade to. Easy to get. Perk relic, you want an isolate of Cosmic Affinity, something like this. Ideally, you'd want a triple stat, like Proficiency Valor Precision or Proficiency Valor Resolve. But this is the one I currently have. Where do you get it? DNA keys, loyalty, Tachyon Anomaly bi-weekly event will also give them to you. And they can, in theory, be a 64, 64, 64 piece, although that's unlikely. Alright, the exotic relic we want is going to be the Ring of Nebulong. With the damage buff and defense buff, passive perks cheesed on it. Do note, despite what it says, it's only a 10% increased critical chance while damage boost is active. But these perks will make your damage buff last 4 seconds longer, so it goes to 16 seconds, which is very good. I don't really utilize the defense buff, but it's there as well. Cornucopia is decent. You can create random orbs. This perk, despite what it says, means your orbs will give you about 50% more in total, which does multiply with rampant assistance, meaning if you have your overcharge going, your percussive blast, and you, of course, this ring equipped, your heroic orbs is going to be about 4.5 times as much. And because you're running this ring, intrinsic orbs, one single intrinsic orb will fully overcharge you, which is very important. This is definitely the ring you want to be running for Panther. Well, here's how you do it. Follow these instructions. Here's the instructions for the gear, and it's going to be very useful for other classes as well. The defense buff and the damage buff these passives will both stay on your Ring of Nebulong. So you get this, which is an amazing piece. Champion points, same as everyone else. The crit ones are very good. These are decent. The defense, heroic charge, perk chance, and status. The healing effectiveness is decent. Status resistance is pretty weak, and these four are much weaker than they appear to be. They're more like 0.3 instead of 0.3 instead of 3. So not good. Don't bother. Stat priority, Valor's your best stat. Most of your attacks are heroic attacks, and the crit damage is insanely good as well. Proficiency is your second best stat. It's going to be the crit chance is very important, and the perk chance is useful as well. You rely on triggering your perks, so it's very important, the crit chance. Your secondary stats, not quite as good as proficiency, but still definitely useful. Resolve, healing, effectiveness, and max health makes you tankier. Have a piece or two of resolve. Precision is useful because you throw your daggers for the heavy combo finisher, but also it will actually make your spears hit harder, as well as Valor makes them hit harder. So precision is a decent stat. Resilience and might aren't very useful, but they're not worthless. So don't go for them, but if you have them, it's fine. And intensity, you absolutely want one piece of intensity. Second piece, yeah, you don't really want it. Third piece is not good. Overall, how's Panther? Well, cool thing about Panther, easy to build. He relies mostly on just RNG pieces, so you don't have to hunt for gear too much. His AoE DPS is very good. His stun damage is also really good. For example, against the Claw phase, his AoE DPS just great against hordes of enemies. He's good at taunting and pushing enemies. For example, in the Eye phase, you can push them into the circle. They'll range intrinsic orbs like candy. You can overcharge the team as well with the Best Chosen, which is very useful. Completely immortal. I mean, he heals himself insanely well with the Percussive Blast, and you're invincible while you activate heroics, and you can just hold the intrinsic while Best Chosen is active, and you take 0 damage. He's completely unkillable if you play him right. His range damage is pretty mediocre, and his single target damage is fine, but it's nothing insane, and he can't fly like Iron Man or Thor, so he's not a top tier hero, but he's definitely a good hero to play with. All right, let's talk about the important abilities. Kinetic Pulse is going to be one of your important filler abilities. It's a light combo that goes into a heavy combo finisher. The cool thing about this ability is it will apply status from heavy combo finisher and kinetic daggers, as well as trigger from both your melee and range piece. While you have Bast Chosen active, it will automatically be the intrinsic version, which spits out way more kinetic spears or kinetic daggers, so that's very useful to have it while Bast Chosen's active. You can hold to block with your intrinsic ability, and while Bast Chosen is active, it is free and you can block unblockable attacks. It makes you completely invincible if you have Bast Chosen's up 24/7. Percussive Blast is one of your most important abilities. It will give you a 200% heroic charge rate as well as a crit chance. It heals you massively as you activate it. You're invincible while you activate it, and it will taunt nearby enemies and do a little bit of damage. You will also occasionally use your devastating daggers if you're at a distance. They will trigger heroic charge bursts. Now let's talk about the important abilities, the heroic abilities. You will use your kimono beads, not so much the recovery beads. You hold to get recovery beads, and you just tap to create the kimono beads. You're going to use Kimono Stinger, which will slowly damage enemies. Very useful for takedowns with your kimono beads. And very important, the kimono bombs. You'll explode them while they're out over enemies. They do really good damage, and they can trigger targeted sparks. You're going to use your heroic spears. As your intrinsic is 100%, they will apply vibranium. Also, every time they hit an enemy, they will create intrinsic orbs. And if you hit like 5 in a row, that's 5 intrinsic orbs. You're just going to be raining intrinsic orbs like candy. You definitely want to run No More Mercy. I recommended Vader's Regret, although the other options are decent. For the Bast Chosen, as you activate it, it'll throw out a Panther that does a lot of damage, and it can trigger heroic sparks. It'll give you a small damage boost and a small damage reduction. And while you have it active, you can block any attack, including the red attacks, completely free. You just hold your Intrinsic, and you're completely invincible if you have your fast chosen up 24/7, and you just hold your Intrinsic. Very good with the heavy combo finisher. I recommend the Adored ones, especially with the heroic 4-piece that spits out another one. They're decent. If you don't have the exotic 4-piece that applies Mark of Fast, I recommend Panther's Roar. And if your teammates are kind of dying a lot, or you find yourself dying a lot, you can run King of Necropolis. You should not ever really be dying with this build. You're an indestructible tank build. So I would normally recommend Adored one if you're running the exotic piece. And you have to run History as Shared. It will instantly overcharge you and teammates. Extremely useful. This one is actually not good. It doesn't even work, so don't even bother with it. For the mastery abilities, I run Panther's Pride. None of these matter at all. I run Cat Got Your Tongue because you'll actually use heavy combo finishers and you're not really going to use these other attacks. Takedowns, Heroic Orbs, no question, you run it for every class. And we're going to be running these two because we're utilizing kinetic daggers. I personally run PhD in physics, although the other two you can run. None of these matter that much. I personally recommend kinetic absorption. It's a nice way to top off your Intrinsic so you can activate a percussive blast while you do heavy combo finishers. This one is decent. This one is worthless. I would say take kinetic damage. These other perks don't really matter. And you will be using intrinsic attacks while Bass Chosen is active, which should be about 24/7. And I recommend Speed of Sound. You will be using your heavy intrinsic attacks, which is your heavy combo finisher. So it's decent. These other two, not very good. I would say take the Vibranium Taunt pretty easily. The taunt is useful, the distance is useful, and these two are very weak for your Percussive Blast. Cool Vibrations, no question. This is a must-take. The 10% crit chance is a nice DPS boost, and it also increases your chance of perks proccing, which is very important. A Nation's Hero, very useful. You should be overcharged about 24/7, and the random heroic orbs that it'll create are very useful for yourself and the team. I'm going to run a quick demonstration of Panther in the arm room and show off all the different abilities and moves. And I'm going to be running hardest difficulty possible.